My son Marcus threw back his head and laughed. Actually laughed, when I told him I was considering removing him from my will. We were standing in his marble-floored kitchen, surrounded by the kind of luxury that his wife Victoria's family money had bought them, and he was looking at me like I'd just told him the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "Dad, seriously? You're going to threaten me with your construction company inheritance?" He was still chuckling, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Do you see this house? Do you know what Victoria's trust fund is worth? Your little business is cute, but we're talking about real money here." Real money. My little business that I'd built from nothing over 35 years that employed 43 people, that was worth just over $8 million. That was cute money to my son who'd married into wealth and forgotten where he came from. 6 months later, Marcus was sobbing into his phone at 2 a.m., calling me from a studio apartment after Victoria had filed for divorce and taken everything in the settlement. Turns out his wife's real money came with real prenups, and my son had just discovered that cute money from Dad might be the only money he had left. "Dad," he cried, his voice broken and desperate. "I made a mistake. I made a terrible mistake. Can we please talk?" Welcome to Family Reckoning. I'm sharing this story today because pride comes before the fall, and sometimes people need to lose everything before they remember who was there when they had nothing. Drop your city or country in the comments below so I know where my family is watching from. Also, please note this video contains fictionalized elements for storytelling and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or places is purely coincidental, but the message about humility and consequences is devastatingly real. The sound of a diesel engine turning over at 5:30 a.m. is something that becomes part of your DNA when you've been in construction for 35 years. It's the sound of honest work beginning before the sun comes up, of men who build things with their hands gathering to create something that will last long after they're gone. I started Henderson Construction in 1988 with a borrowed pickup truck, a toolbox my father had left me, and exactly $2,400 in savings. Marcus was 3 years old then, barely talking, but he loved riding in that truck with me to job sites, wearing a tiny hard hat and safety glasses, watching his old man frame houses and pour foundations. "Daddy, what are you building?" he'd ask, standing on the tailgate while I unloaded lumber. "Something strong, son," I'd tell him, lifting him down to solid ground. "Something that will be here long after we're gone. That's what we do, we build things that last." Marcus grew up on construction sites. He spent summers working for me starting at age 14, digging trenches, hauling materials, learning the difference between work and labor. By the time he graduated high school, he could read blueprints, operate most of our equipment, and handle every aspect of residential construction. "College or the business?" I asked him during his senior year. "Either way, you've got my support." "College first," he said. "Then maybe we can expand Henderson Construction. Make it into something bigger." I was proud of his ambition. Marcus had always been smart, not just intelligent, but sharp about business opportunities and strategic thinking. He understood that education could open doors that experience alone might not reach. He earned his degree in business administration from Ohio State, studying project management and finance. I paid his tuition gladly, seeing it as an investment in our family business. The plan was for him to come back with fresh ideas about expansion, modernization, maybe commercial development projects. But college changed Marcus in ways I hadn't expected. He came home for Christmas his junior year speaking differently, dressing differently, talking about career opportunities in corporate consulting, and strategic positioning in high-growth markets. "Dad, the construction business is fine for what it is," he told me during that visit, sitting in our modest living room like he was visiting a museum. "But the real money is in development and investment. Building is just one piece of a much larger economic puzzle. The real money." He'd learned to talk about our family business like it was some kind of preliminary step toward more important opportunities. After graduation, Marcus took a job at a consulting firm in Columbus, specializing in commercial real estate development. Within 2 years, he was making more money than I paid myself from the construction company, wearing suits that cost more than most of our employees made in a week. Our relationship became a series of monthly dinners where Marcus would update me on his professional advancement while subtly suggesting improvements to my outdated business practices. "Dad, you should really consider incorporating more technology into your operations," he'd say, scrolling through his phone while I tried to tell him about a challenging foundation repair we'd completed. Project management software, digital scheduling, automated bidding systems. You're leaving money on the table by sticking to manual processes. I'd listen patiently while he explained how modern businesses operated, how successful people leverage technology and strategic partnerships to scale their operations. But I could hear what he wasn't saying. That my way of doing business was old-fashioned, inefficient, beneath the standards of someone with his education. Marcus, I'd say, I appreciate the advice, but our clients hire us because we do quality work, we finish on time, and we stand behind what we build. That's not about software, that's about integrity. Of course, Dad, I'm not criticizing what you do. I'm just saying there are more sophisticated approaches to business development. More sophisticated. That was Marcus's way of saying that 35 years of successful construction work wasn't sophisticated enough for the person he'd become. Everything changed when Marcus met Victoria Cambridge. Victoria came from what Marcus called Old Columbus money, which meant her great-grandfather had made a fortune in banking and her family had spent 4 generations converting that wealth into social status and political connections. She was beautiful, educated, and possessed the particular kind of confidence that comes from never having worried about money in her entire life. Marcus was completely enchanted by her world. Within 6 months of dating her, he'd begun modifying everything about himself. His speech patterns, his clothing, his interests, even his opinions about politics and culture, to align with what he perceived as her family's expectations. Victoria's father manages a portfolio worth over $50 million. He told me during one of our increasingly strained dinners. He's been mentoring me about investment strategies and market positioning. He says I have real potential in commercial development, that construction experience gives me credible insight into development costs. That's good, son. It sounds like he appreciates your background. Exactly. He sees the value in understanding the industry from the ground up. Though he did mention that the real opportunities are in ownership and financing rather than actual construction work. Within a year, Marcus and Victoria were engaged. The announcement appeared in the Columbus Dispatch Society pages, describing her as the daughter of prominent investment banker Charles Cambridge, and him as a commercial development specialist with extensive experience in the construction industry. Extensive experience in the construction industry. No mention of Henderson Construction, no acknowledgement that his extensive experience came from working for his father's company. No recognition that everything he knew about construction had been learned on job sites I'd brought him to since he was 3 years old. The wedding was held at the Cambridge family estate, a sprawling property outside Columbus that had been in their family for 3 generations. 200 guests attended, business executives, political figures, social families whose names appeared regularly in the business journals. I wore my best suit and tried to fit into a world where everyone seemed to know each other and speak in a code I didn't entirely understand. During the reception, I found myself seated at a table with other family friends and distant relatives, while Marcus worked the room like a networking event, introducing himself to people who could advance his career. When he reached our table, he introduced me with careful neutrality. "This is my father, Tom Henderson," he said to a group of Victoria's father's business associates. "He runs a local construction company. He runs a local construction company. Not, this is my father who built the business that paid for my education and taught me everything I know about construction. Not, this is the man whose work ethic and integrity shaped who I am. Just a polite, minimal acknowledgement that I existed and ran a local business." I watched Marcus disappear into his new social circle, becoming someone I didn't recognize, and I understood that my son had made a choice about which world he wanted to belong to. Marcus and Victoria's married life was everything he dreamed it would be. They bought a house in Dublin, one of Columbus's most expensive suburbs. A $1.2 million colonial with marble floors, granite countertops, and enough space to entertain the kind of people Victoria's family socialized with. Marcus left the consulting firm to start his own commercial development company, funded by a loan from Victoria's father and backed by connections from her family's business network. Within 3 years, he was developing high-end retail and office properties, making more money than he'd ever imagined possible. Our relationship became even more distant. Marcus would call every few months with updates about his business success, his new social connections, his wife's family's various achievements. But he stopped asking about Henderson Construction beyond polite, surface-level questions. "How's the building business, Dad?" He'd ask with the tone someone uses to inquire about a hobby rather than a serious enterprise. When I'd mentioned something significant, a major contract we'd won, a complex project we'd completed, recognition we'd received from the local contractors association. He'd respond with distracted nods and quick subject changes. That's great, Dad. Hey, did I tell you about the office complex we're breaking ground on next month? 200,000 square feet, mixed-use development, anchored by a Fortune 500 company. My successes became footnotes to his achievements. My news became background noise to his more important updates. The shift became most apparent during family gatherings. Victoria would host elaborate dinner parties at their house, events that showcased their wealth and social connections. I was invited, but my presence felt carefully managed. Dad, I'm so glad you could make it, Marcus would say when I arrived, his voice carrying the particular tone people use when they're acknowledging someone they feel obligated to include. You remember Victoria's parents, don't you? And this is her Uncle Richard. He's on the board of 3 different banks. I'd be introduced to Victoria's extended family and their business associates as Marcus's father, without any mention of my work or background. The conversations would focus on investment strategies, political developments, and social events I had no connection to. During one particularly uncomfortable dinner, Victoria's father was discussing commercial real estate trends with several other businessmen. The conversation turned to construction costs and contractor reliability. The problem with most construction companies, Charles Cambridge said, cutting his steak with practiced precision, is that they think small. No strategic vision, no understanding of the bigger economic picture. They're content to build one house at a time instead of thinking about portfolio development and market positioning. I was sitting 3 feet away, listening to my son's father-in-law dismiss the entire construction industry as small-thinking and strategically limited. Marcus said nothing. He didn't defend the industry that had built his opportunities, didn't mention that his father ran a successful construction company, didn't suggest that maybe there was value in building things properly rather than just thinking strategically about building things. He just nodded along with Charles's assessment of construction contractors as people who think small. That's when I realized that Marcus hadn't just joined Victoria's family. He'd adopted their perspective about the social hierarchy, with investment and development at the top and actual construction work somewhere near the bottom. The breaking point came during Marcus's 30th birthday party. Victoria had organized an elaborate celebration at their house, catered dinner for 50 people, premium wine, live jazz ensemble. The guest list was dominated by Victoria's family and their business associates, people Marcus wanted to impress and cultivate relationships with. I arrived at 6 p.m. carrying a gift I had custom-made, a walnut shadow box containing tools from my father's original toolbox, the same tools Marcus had played with as a child, the tools that had built the foundation for everything he'd achieved. "Happy birthday, son," I said, handing him the shadow box. "I thought you might like to have Grandpa's tools, the ones you used to play with when you were little." Marcus opened the box in front of several guests, including Victoria's parents and her Uncle Richard. His face went through a quick series of expressions: recognition, nostalgia, and then embarrassment. "Oh, Dad, that's very thoughtful," he said, closing the box quickly. "I'll put this somewhere safe." "I thought you could display it in your office," I suggested. "Remember how you used to pretend to build houses with Grandpa's hammer?" Marcus's face flushed. "Dad, maybe we can talk about this later. I should get back to our guests." But Charles Cambridge had overheard the conversation. "Marcus, I didn't know you had family in the trades," he said with the polite curiosity of someone examining an interesting historical artifact. "My father runs a construction company," Marcus said reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "How interesting. What kind of construction?" I could see Marcus struggling with how to answer. He could acknowledge Henderson Construction as a successful business, which would mean claiming a connection to blue-collar work in front of people he was trying to impress. Or he could minimize it, which would mean dismissing 35 years of my work. "Mostly residential," Marcus said finally. "Small-scale stuff. Dad keeps busy." Small-scale stuff. Dad keeps busy. As though Henderson Construction was a retirement hobby rather than a multimillion-dollar business that employed dozens of people and had built half the custom homes in our area. Charles nodded politely and moved on to discussing Marcus's development projects with someone else. But I had heard what I needed to hear. My son was ashamed of the work that had made his success possible, and he was willing to diminish it publicly to maintain his social positioning. I stayed for another hour, making polite conversation with people who were clearly wondering why a construction worker was at their elegant dinner party. When I left, Marcus walked me to my truck. Dad, thanks for coming tonight. And thanks for the gift. It really is meaningful. Is it, Marcus? Because it seemed like you were pretty eager to change the subject. What do you mean? I mean, you just told a room full of people that my business is small-scale stuff, and that I keep busy. Like I'm some kind of part-time handyman instead of someone who built a successful company from nothing. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Dad, you're being sensitive. I was just explaining the business in terms they'd understand. What I understand is that you're ashamed of where you came from. What I understand is that you've decided that the work that paid for your education and built your opportunities isn't sophisticated enough to acknowledge in front of your wife's family. That's not fair, Dad. I'm not ashamed of you. I'm just navigating different social contexts. Social contexts, right? I looked at the house behind him, the marble entryway, the luxury cars in the driveway. Marcus, I need you to understand something. Everything you see here, everything you've accomplished, everything you think makes you better than the construction business. It all started with a man who worked with his hands and taught you that quality matters more than appearance. Dad, I know that. I appreciate everything you've done. But I've built something different now. I've moved beyond. Beyond what? Beyond respect for the people who built your foundation. Marcus's expression hardened. Dad, I think you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. We're both successful in our own ways. We don't need to compare or compete. I'm not competing with you, son. I'm trying to understand how you became someone who's embarrassed by his own father's work. I'm not embarrassed. I'm part of a different world now. Victoria's family, their social circle. They have different expectations and standards. Different standards. Standards that apparently didn't include respect for the people who did the actual work that made their investments profitable. That's when I said the words that would change everything between us. Marcus, I've been thinking about updating my will. Given how you feel about the construction business, maybe it doesn't make sense to leave it to someone who sees it as small-scale stuff. Marcus stared at me for a moment, processing what I'd said. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. Throwing his head back like I'd told him the funniest joke he'd ever heard. Dad, seriously? You're going to threaten me with your construction company inheritance? He was still chuckling, wiping his eyes. Do you see this house? Do you know what Victoria's trust fund is worth? Your little business is cute, but we're talking about real money here. Real money. My $8 million company that employed 43 people was cute money, compared to his wife's trust fund. I see, I said quietly. Well, I'm glad we clarified that. I got in my truck and drove home, understanding finally that Marcus had made his choice. He'd decided that his father's love and 35 years of building something meaningful was worth less than maintaining his position in Victoria's social circle. But what Marcus didn't understand was that his wife's real money came with strings attached, and he was about to find out exactly how expensive those strings could be. Before I tell you about the phone call that changed everything, the moment Marcus discovered that cute money from Dad might be the only money he could count on. Let me know you're still invested. Comment, still here? Or drop 100 points below so I know you're following along. What comes next is where 5 years of pride and arrogance met one moment of devastating reality. And just a heads up, the following events incorporate some dramatic storytelling elements for educational purposes. If that's not your style, feel free to click away now. But if you want to see how quickly real money can disappear when it was never really yours, let's keep going. I didn't change my will immediately. Despite my anger and disappointment, Marcus was still my son, and I hoped that maybe he'd come to his senses about what really mattered in life. But I did make some changes to how I interacted with him. I stopped calling for our monthly dinners. I stopped asking about his business or pretending interest in his social climbing. When he called me, I kept the conversations brief and practical. How are you doing, Dad? He'd ask. Fine, son. Business is good. Weather's been decent for outdoor work. That's great. Victoria and I have been busy with the new development project. We're looking at expanding into retail space in addition to office buildings. Sounds like you're doing well. We are. Actually, Dad, we should get together soon. Maybe you could come see the new property we're developing. We'll see, Marcus. I'm pretty busy with work. I wasn't trying to punish him exactly, but I also wasn't going to keep pretending that our relationship hadn't fundamentally changed. He'd made it clear that my work and my world weren't worthy of his respect, so I stopped trying to earn that respect. Meanwhile, Henderson construction continued to thrive. We'd landed a major contract to build custom homes in a new subdivision, and I'd hired 6 additional employees to handle the increased workload. The business was generating more revenue than ever, and I was considering expansion into commercial construction. But I also started thinking seriously about succession planning. If Marcus wasn't interested in taking over the company, if he saw it as small-scale stuff that wasn't worth his time, then I needed to consider other options. I began grooming my lead foreman, Dave Rodriguez, for a management role. Dave had been with me for 12 years, understood every aspect of the business, and shared my commitment to quality and integrity. I started teaching him about the financial side of operations, client relations, and strategic planning. "Tom," Dave said during one of our planning sessions, "are you thinking about retiring?" "Not retiring exactly, but I'm thinking about what happens to this business when I'm gone. I want to make sure it stays in the hands of people who understand what we've built here." "What about Marcus?" "I thought he was going to take over eventually." "Marcus has other priorities," I said simply. "He's built a successful business of his own. He doesn't need this one." I also started documenting everything: the company's financial records, client relationships, operational procedures, and growth potential. If I was going to transfer ownership to Dave or sell to another contractor, I wanted to ensure that Henderson Construction's reputation and values would be preserved. What I didn't expect was how quickly Marcus's real money situation would change. The first sign of trouble came in a phone call from Marcus in late spring, about 4 months after his birthday party. "Dad, I wanted to ask you about something. Do you know any contractors who specialize in commercial foundation work?" "What kind of commercial foundation?" "We're having some issues with the office complex project. The original contractor's work isn't meeting specifications, and we need to bring in someone to fix it before we can proceed with construction." This was exactly the kind of problem I'd been solving for 35 years. Foundation work was one of Henderson Construction's specialties, and we had extensive experience with commercial projects. "I could take a look at it," I offered. "Commercial foundation repair is something we do regularly." Pause. "Dad, I appreciate the offer, but this is a pretty complex situation. We need someone with specific expertise in large-scale commercial work." "Large-scale commercial work, as opposed to the small-scale stuff my company did." "Marcus, I've been doing commercial foundation work since before you were born. What exactly do you think is beyond our capabilities?" "It's not that you're not capable, Dad. It's just that this project has very specific requirements, and Victoria's father has relationships with contractors who specialize in this type of work." "I see. Well, good luck with it." But 3 weeks later, Marcus called again. "Dad, about that foundation work, are you still available to take a look? The contractor we hired is way over budget and behind schedule." "What happened to the specialist with specific expertise?" It didn't work out. Look, we're under a lot of pressure to get this project back on track. Can you help us or not?" I drove out to look at the job site the next day. The foundation work was a disaster. Improper footings, incorrect grade levels, drainage issues that would cause major problems during the first heavy rain. The specialist contractor had charged them $180,000 to create a foundation that would have to be completely rebuilt. "How much to fix this?" Marcus asked, walking around the site with me. "To do it right, tear out everything they did and start over. About $40,000 and 3 weeks of work." "40,000? The other contractor charged us $180. "And what did you get for $180, Marcus?" "A foundation that won't support the building you want to put on top of it." Marcus hired Henderson Construction to fix the foundation. We completed the work on time and under budget, solving drainage issues the previous contractor hadn't even identified. The project moved forward successfully. But I noticed that Marcus didn't advertise our involvement to Victoria's family or his business partners. When people asked about the construction delays, he explained them as contractor issues that had been resolved through alternative sourcing, not as a problem that his father's company had solved. I was good enough to fix his expensive mistakes, but not good enough to be acknowledged for the quality of our work. The real crisis began 6 months after Marcus's birthday party, though I didn't learn about it until much later. Victoria had apparently been having an affair with her personal trainer, a young man who possessed all the physical attributes that Marcus's sedentary business lifestyle had caused him to lose. The affair had been going on for over a year, carefully hidden behind the elaborate social calendar that Victoria managed with such precision. But more damaging than the affair was what Victoria's divorce attorney discovered during the financial disclosure process. Marcus had been overspending significantly, using credit lines secured against his business assets to fund the lifestyle he thought was necessary to maintain his position in Victoria's social circle. The custom suits, the expensive dinners, the luxury travel, the networking events. Marcus had been financing his image with borrowed money, assuming that his business success would continue indefinitely and that Victoria's family wealth provided an unlimited safety net. He was wrong on both counts. Victoria's trust fund, it turned out, was structured specifically to prevent spouses from accessing the principal in divorce proceedings. The Cambridge family lawyers had been planning for this possibility since Victoria turned 18, building legal protections that would preserve their wealth regardless of who she married or divorced. Marcus discovered this when Victoria filed for divorce on a Tuesday morning in November, accompanied by a team of attorneys who had spent weeks preparing a comprehensive asset seizure strategy. The house, which was titled in Victoria's name, reverted to her immediately. The development business, which was funded by loans from Victoria's father and secured by both personal guarantees from Marcus and claims against Victoria's future inheritance, was effectively paralyzed pending resolution of the divorce settlement. Most devastating of all, Victoria's attorneys had identified Marcus's overspending patterns and were demanding immediate repayment of all personal expenses that had been charged to business accounts. A total of over $300,000 that Marcus had spent on maintaining his lifestyle while married to Victoria. Marcus went from believing he was worth several $1,000,000 to discovering that he was actually in debt by more than $500,000, with no access to the house he'd been living in, no control over the business he thought he owned, and no source of income to pay for the legal representation he desperately needed. The phone rang at my house at 2:17 a.m. on a Wednesday in late November. "Dad." Marcus's voice was broken, barely recognizable. "Dad, I need help." I sat up in bed, immediately alert. "Marcus, what's wrong?" "Victoria filed for divorce. She's taking everything. The house, the business, everything. Dad, I don't know what to do." He was crying, not just emotional, but sobbing with the desperation of someone whose entire world had collapsed in a single day. "Where are you calling from, son?" "A studio apartment on the east side. It's all I can afford." "Dad, I was so wrong. About everything. About you, about what matters, about what real success looks like." "Marcus." "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I laughed at you. I'm sorry I treated your business like it didn't matter. I'm sorry I was ashamed of you in front of Victoria's family. I was an idiot. I was an arrogant, stupid idiot who forgot where I came from." I got out of bed, walked to the kitchen, and made coffee while my son cried into the phone from a studio apartment, having lost everything he thought defined his worth. "What do you need, Marcus?" "I need my father," he said simply. "I need advice from someone who understands what it means to build something real, something that lasts. I need help from someone who's never been ashamed of honest work." "I'm here, son." "Dad, can we talk? In person. I know I don't deserve it after how I've treated you, but I need to understand how to start over. How to build something that's actually mine instead of just borrowing other people's success. Come to the office tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Bring coffee and we'll figure this out together." "Dad." "Yeah, Marcus. I love you, and I'm proud to be your son. I should have said that 5 years ago instead of being embarrassed by the man who built everything I took for granted." Marcus showed up at Henderson Construction the next morning looking like he hadn't slept in a week. His expensive clothes had been replaced with jeans and a plain shirt, and he carried 2 cups of coffee from the gas station down the street. "I know it's not Starbucks," he said, handing me a cup, "but it's what I can afford now." We sat in my office, surrounded by 35 years of business records, project photos, and client testimonials. Marcus looked around like he was seeing it all for the first time. "Dad, I owe you an apology, not just for laughing at your will comment, but for years of disrespecting what you built here. This is impressive. This is real success. It's honest work, Marcus. That's all it's ever been. It's more than that. It's integrity. It's building relationships and delivering quality and creating something that matters. I spent 5 years chasing other people's definition of success, and I forgot that you already showed me what real success looks like." We talked for 3 hours that morning. Marcus told me about the financial mess he was in, the legal battles he was facing, the complete destruction of the life he thought he'd built. "What do you want to do now?" I asked. "I want to learn the business. Really learn it this time. not as someone who's too good for construction work, but as someone who understands that construction work is honorable and valuable and worth doing well. It's not going to be easy, Marcus. You're 30 years old, and you've been away from actual construction for almost 10 years. You'll be starting at the bottom, learning from people who've been doing this work longer than you've been in business. I know. I deserve that. I need that. And I need to know that you're here because you want to be, not because you're out of other options. This isn't a safety net, it's a career. If you're going to work for Henderson Construction, you're going to work for Henderson Construction, not bide your time until something better comes along. Marcus looked me in the eye with more honesty than I'd seen from him in years. Dad, there is nothing better than this. It took losing everything for me to understand that. But you built something real here, something that matters, something that provides for dozens of families and creates value in the community. I want to be part of that. I want to earn my place in it. Over the next 6 months, Marcus rebuilt his life from the foundation up. He moved into a small apartment within his means, took a position as a project supervisor with Henderson Construction, and began learning the business from the ground up. The divorce settlement left him with significant debt, but he was earning a steady income and slowly paying down what he owed. More importantly, he was rediscovering his respect for construction work and the people who did it. You know what's funny? He told me one evening as we finished up a particularly challenging framing job. Victoria's father always talked about people who think small, but building something with your hands, creating something that will last for decades, providing good jobs for people who work hard, that's not thinking small. That's thinking about what actually matters. A year later, I updated my will. Henderson Construction would pass to Marcus, not because he was my son, but because he'd proven that he understood the values the business was built on. But more importantly, Marcus had learned something about success and self-worth that no trust fund or social connection could teach. He'd learned that real wealth comes from work that matters, relationships built on respect, and the knowledge that what you've built belongs to you because you earned it. The last time I saw Victoria was at a charity event downtown. She was with her new boyfriend, another young professional who fit perfectly into her social circle. When she saw Marcus across the room in his work clothes, having come straight from a job site, she looked right through him like he didn't exist. Marcus noticed it too. "You know what, Dad?" he said, brushing sawdust off his shirt. "I feel sorry for whoever she marries next, because they'll never know if she loves them or just loves what they can do for her social status. And you know the difference now?" "Yeah, I know the difference. And I know which one actually matters." If there's one thing this experience taught me about family and success, it's this: real wealth isn't something you inherit or marry into. It's something you build through your own effort and maintain through your own character. Money that belongs to other people can disappear as quickly as it appeared. Trust funds come with conditions. Social status is dependent on other people's approval. But the skills you develop, the relationships you build through honest work, and the respect you earn through integrity, those things belong to you permanently. To every parent watching their children chase other people's definitions of success, don't give up on teaching them the value of honest work. Sometimes they need to lose everything before they can see clearly what really matters. And to every adult child who's ever been embarrassed by their parents' work, success that you didn't build yourself is just borrowed glory. Someday you might need to rely on your own foundation, and you'll want that foundation to be solid. These family stories aren't easy to tell. They require admitting that love and pride can be conditional, that children can break their parents' hearts, and that sometimes the people we're proudest of can become people we don't recognize. But I believe they need to be told because there are millions of parents out there watching their children adopt values that reject everything they tried to teach them. If the story reached something in you, if you've ever been made to feel small because of honest work, or if you've ever taken for granted the people who built your opportunities, I want you to know character is more valuable than capital. Integrity outlasts image. And the people who love you when you have nothing are the only ones who matter when you lose everything else. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. If it helped you understand something about pride, humility, or the real meaning of success, please share it. Subscribe to Family Reckoning so you never miss another story about families learning what actually matters. And remember, sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you already had. Note: this story contains dramatic elements created for educational and entertainment purposes. While based on real patterns of family dynamics and financial consequences, specific details have been crafted to illustrate important principles about respect and humility. Always seek professional guidance for serious family relationship issues.